Yes.
Take a peek.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Independent Assurance Program. It is in the Material Sampling Manual S701-20. And for some of the new ones, why do we do independent assurance sampling? Well, it's because the FHWA requires it. It's in the Code of Federal Regulations, CFR 23. And it's a way to check just our equipment and our personnel procedures. This extra set of tests does not evaluate the quality of the material. I know that sounds weird, but it's just a way to check the equipment and the people. And the FHWA allows two different approaches: the project approach, which is what we've been doing for years and years and years, and then the system approach, which we are moving toward. The IA program gives us confidence that we're getting good results, but it doesn't actually evaluate the material itself. I'm only going to give a little bit of background, and then mostly you care about what do I have to do, right? Okay, so the system approach, what satisfies the requirements of the system approach is the lab accreditation, which we're doing CMEC right now, the proficiency samples, and right now the labs participate for asphalt and aggregates, and individuals are participating on aggregates now. And then the Mat Lab has to prepare an annual report. If we do that for each particular material, then the FHWA thinks we're good. The project approach is for NHS projects only, and only if the item quantity is over the minimum trigger. You have to take, I guess y'all want me to move that, huh? Take a split sample or side-by-side samples of IA versus acceptance. You want that material to be as exact as possible for both of the testers. That's why you took cores exactly side-by-side or retested the existing core. If you had a soil sample, you'd want to split it so that everybody is doing exactly the same material. All right, but you have to use different equipment and you have to use different testers, except for the compression machine. The concrete compression machine is supposed to be calibrated once per year, but since we use the same equipment for both IA and acceptance, the feds allow that, but we have to calibrate it twice a year. Am I going too fast or too slow? Anyone?
You're good.
All right.
Good to me.
All right, so compare the results of IA versus acceptance and then investigate if needed, and then prepare the IA certification form. The project approach just targets these certain projects. The system approach, however, touches everyone who does these samples. So even though it's a little more expensive, it's actually a better system because we check every single person who does an aggregate gradation. All right. Here in the new IA procedure, in the sampling plan, sampling manual, it actually lists what is an NHS route for your district. There's also some links up here if you want to go look at a map instead of a listing to see exactly where it is. All right, so this is for project approach only. System approach, we're handling it. You don't even have to really do anything, for a project, except I'll tell you what you have to do later. But the project approach, first you check to see if it's too small. This is your main form. And you got the header information here, but before you even go to that, look at your minimum trigger. Embankment, 5,000 linear feet. Base course, 5,000 linear feet. Structural concrete, 500 cubic yards. If your NHS project has quantities below that, you put IA, not needed, too small. You check this box. If it's not an NHS project, you can check that box. If the IA is needed for the project, you check that box. All right, so if it is needed, you fill out all this header information. There's a place for the lab engineer name, project engineer name, date up here. And you check IA needed. Then you go over here and you put the actual project quantity. Then you compute the number of samples needed. For an embankment project, you're going to do 1 per 10,000 linear feet per roadway per lift. So if you've got 10,000 linear feet, you're going to need 1 sample. For usable soil, you're going to do a classification. Same thing, 1 per 10,000 linear feet per roadway per lift. If you had 20,000 linear feet, you're going to need 2 samples. And that's all you do. You fill out these 2 columns and then you sign it here. And it says initial sampling plan. You've got the date up here, when you created it, and your signature here. Then you give it to the project engineer. And then you wait for him to notify you or her to notify you that you need to go out and perform these samples. All right, you notice we added here resistivity, 1 set per 2,000 cubic yards. We have density for stone, recycled concrete, and BCS, 1 per 10,000 linear feet per roadway per lift. And this is approved by the feds. All right, now the PE has to notify the Lab of Construction activity for the scheduling of IA. And embankment, you'll notice classification is soil only, it's no longer required for non-plastic embankment. Non-plastic embankment is now covered under the system approach. And then density, you've got to run side-by-side tests with the lab. For base course density, you don't have to take a sample for gradation anymore, but you do have to do density, so you run side-by-side tests with the lab. Structural concrete, slump and air, run side-by-side tests with the lab. And cylinders, the lab has to come out and make comparison samples from the same material. Different equipment, different personnel. Different set of slump cones, and different people. You know what to do. I've been doing that a while. And here's the frequency. We already talked about that for usable soil and non-plastic embankment. It used to be 1 per 2 weeks of construction, but now it's by length. I just think it's easier to keep up with it that way. Also, we no longer do shoulders, just the roadway. And like I mentioned before, there are no aggregate tests required for gradation because it's covered under system. All the gradation testers receive an annual proficiency sample, and the lab is inspected by CMET. Any questions so far? All right, base course, stone, recycled Portland cement concrete, and blended calcium sulfate. Density 1 per 10,000 linear feet per roadway per lift. Used to be 1 every 2 weeks of construction, but now it's by length. No shoulders and no aggregate tests. Really tried to make this a little simpler and more relevant to quality. All right, so you got your IA versus acceptance samples now. We've changed the tolerances a little bit, and thanks to everybody who helped with this. So embankment, for all embankments on the density, it's now plus or minus 3%. So if you have a 91.0 for IA and a 92.3 for acceptance, you are within that tolerance of plus or minus 3%. Classification, you used to look at the group number and all that. We're not doing that anymore. It's the number 10, the number 40, and the number 200, and plus or minus 5, 2, and 2 on that. For base course density, plus or minus 3. For structural concrete, in case there's any confusion, we listed the types here: A1, A2, A3, S, mass A1, mass A2, mass A3. Not minor structural, just real important stuff. The slump can be plus or minus 0.5 inches. The air can be plus or minus, plus or minus 0.5%. The strength is plus or minus 7% of the set average. The surface resistivity is plus or minus 11%. Now these two are, really want you to pay attention to these two. There is a footnote here which gives you an example. When you're doing plus or minus 7% or plus or minus 11%, you taking the average acceptance test and determining your tolerance from that. So for example, on your surface resistivity, if your acceptance is 36 kiloohm centimeters, 11% of 36 is 3.96 or 4 kiloohm centimeters. So your tolerance is 4 kiloohm centimeters. So in other words, this tolerance can actually change right here for these two. Air is determined in percent, so that is plus or minus 0.5 of your actual air reading, but these two are different. All right, the forms for comparing IA versus acceptance are on the website and they are fillable. Casey did that. When you go to forms and worksheets, general use forms, you've got the IA versus acceptance report, the IA sampling plan, and the IA certification. It's only 3. You don't have all of those cumbersome letters and dear sir and all that. Here's the how to get to it. When you go to the form, it kind of looks like an Excel. You've got project number, federal aid, project name, project engineer, lab engineer, district date. For the material right here, it is a drop down. So for this one, you're doing soil classification. You're only going to see the soil classifications that should apply. And you drop down and pick one. Dang it. All right, then you enter your, here's where you enter the results. Passing 10, 40, 200, you enter the IA, you enter the acceptance. The difference actually computes right here. The tolerance appears here, and it automatically displays whether it verifies or not. I think there are 3 tabs on the IA versus acceptance report. This tab is the soil classification one. The next tab is the embankment and base course density one. And it does the same thing. All the header you populate, but for the IA and acceptance sample, you put the sample ID here, density here. The difference computes, checks it on the tolerance, and it either says verifies or it says does not verify. Now notice on all of these, if it does not verify, you perform an investigation, complete the following and attach it to the IA certification. So here are the results of your investigation. Here is your corrective action. All right, here's the third one, which is structural concrete, IA versus acceptance. You've got all the header stuff here. Slump, you enter IA slump and air here, IA acceptance here. Your difference computes, checks your tolerance and gives you results. We talked about that footnote. It says for strength and resistivity, the tolerance is not a set number. It's a percent of the acceptance set average. The examples in the footnote and the actual, but it still computes for you. The actual difference and result is computed automatically on the form. So when you enter the results, it all handles it. All right, so you gave out your sampling plan. The PE's been calling you. You're doing your tests. You're completing your forms as you go. And now it's the end of the project. You put here the number of samples actually taken, the number of samples that actually did verify. Hopefully these numbers will be the same and everything's good. You then sign it and date it. It's all on the same form. You literally have one of these forms to turn in to represent all the sampling and testing numbers that you did. So you complete the IA sampling. I want that thing go up. I don't know. Anyway, you complete this sampling plan. Then you have to do the IA certification. This is now all on one form as well. You can fill in the header information up here. And this says, this is to certify that all independent samples and tests are within tolerance limits of the samples and tests that are used in the acceptance program for the above referenced project, except as noted herein. Believe it or not, this wording comes straight out of the federal guidelines. You sign it, date it. Your copies now go to the material engineer administrator, that's me, the assistant district administrator of engineering, I guess that's probably your boss, the project engineer, and the FHWA representative. And then right below, omitted tests provide explanation and corrective actions. This is almost like an errors and omissions. If somebody didn't communicate and you just failed to get some, then you need to explain it here. And then the non-verifying tests. This is guidelines about how to do an investigation and corrective action. You need to list the material, the test, the IA sample ID, the acceptance sample ID, the difference, the tolerance limits, the result of an investigation, and the corrective action. But really, you can just attach those IA versus acceptance reports. It has most of this on it, but this is a good guideline for what to put on those reports, and then also list anything omitted. And you could attach extra pages if needed. So the changes are, it's shortened, simplified, forms are fillable, no project tests for asphalt or aggregate gradations. These are now system-based. No density on shoulder. Densities now by length instead of every 2 weeks. The new district lab duties are participate in the proficiency samples and maintain CMEC accreditation. Create the initial IA sampling plan for NHS projects only. Take IA samples in conjunction with acceptance. Complete the IA versus acceptance reports on sample pairs. Complete the sampling plan summary at the end of the project, and complete the IA certification along with exceptions and distribute. The project engineer duties are, and by the way, I have a super shortened presentation for them. I'll be thinking about if I should offer it to them or not. But the project engineer duties are receive the IA sampling plan from the district lab and notify district labs to schedule IA testing for embankment base course and structural concrete. And future wishes, I would love to add soils to CMEC and proficiency sample program for classification and lab proctors. Just the thought, it would be nice to have every person who performs a density test come to the district lab yearly and do a side-by-side test. And that way we wouldn't have to go back in the field anymore. And you're sure that every single tester is being checked once a year. Yeah, and their equipment, the tester and the equipment, because we have a lot of trouble with density. I don't know what to do about field proctors. I guess if they came to the lab, maybe they could make one. I don't know. Anyway, any questions? Do you want to go back to any screens? Do you get it? Like it? Hate it?
There's a question in chat that asks, are we testing in-place cement stabilized base courses?
You know, I think that would be a density. That would be the density. I guess it would be, I need to maybe add that here. Because here, if you had cement stabilized embankment, you would be checked under this density right here. I mean, the feds approved it without it, but it'd be, tell me what that is. You go back and you have like a soil aggregate mixture and you're adding cement to it and stabilizing it in place.
That was from Kyle Taylor in 03. Kyle, you still on? Can you elaborate?
Yeah, Luana.
Yeah.
That's your normal 303 item?
303?
Yes,
okay, so
ma'am.
I would say
and
no.
302.
Oh, 302 maybe.
Okay. I know we were doing samples and density tests on that base course.
I'm thinking if we,
Samples for percent cement also.
yeah, I think we're going to eliminate that. I think for one thing, it's not very consistent, right? It's a pretty variable test to do percent cement. So I don't see the usefulness of that in an IA program. As far as density,
Okay.
we're going to have enough demonstrations of our ability to do density on just regular embankment and on these stones. So I think we're kind of proving our worth at doing density. I just feel that the cement treated base is too variable to really be that good, you know, as far as percent cement.
Right.
What do y'all think? Yay, we don't want to do it, right?
Yeah.
I'm okay with
What
it.
are the soil samples on, Luanna?
The, right here, soil, the embankment.
Not the density, but the ones where you're showing running a soil sample. It was on the other page where your soil sample, right
That?
there.
All right.
Okay, on all embankment and usable soil. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, that's what you usually use for embankment under the road, right?
Yes.
Unless it's non-plastic, in which case we're covered by doing gradations on the system approach.
Okay.
Yes.
Now I was just looking at what
David,
we were comparing the 1040 and the 200 passing numbers.
You gave me these. What do you remember?
Okay. Yeah,
Thank
it's
you,
been a
Carl.
while. Yeah, how many times we talked about stuff so I done forgot by now. All right.
You gave it to me, and Marcia gave a thumbs up. So we're good.
All right.
I think the one I didn't know about was, I didn't know if this should have been 2 or 3, but we went with 2.
Did we ever get the sampling plan IA separated and published?
What do you mean? The
Like
form?
in the published sampling plan online, we had IA by the material, and you were talking about ripping all that out and putting it in one place where all the IA was grouped together. I wasn't sure if that's
Yes, it's all
done and
moved.
published.
Yeah, are you talking about the actual sampling plan? Yeah, we did that.
the actual
Oh,
sampling.
we didn't publish that yet, but we have a draft. That's a good point. Of the sampling plan where we have taken out every single line of IA, and we're just going to refer you to S701 instead of having, you go through 203 and it says, oh, for IA, look at 701. And you go to another section, 302, and it says, oh, for IA, look at 701. We took all of that clutter out, and it's all going to be in S701. The reason we haven't published it, I'm kind of waiting on this EDSM review so that we can revise the intro. And in the intro, we're going to say all IAs in 701. It's so close. But that's why we haven't published it yet. We also took out all of the preliminary source approval stuff unless you get some of those kind of on a project basis, like BCS or crushed concrete. We left the preliminary source approval for just those 2 materials, but all that clutter got taken out too.
Luanna, just for information for the other people online that may have not been around when we were discussing all this stuff when you first started working on it, because we've had a lot of lab engineer changes.
Yeah.
Make sure when you look at the map of where your NHS routes are, that just because it says Highway 139 or Highway 50 or whatever it is, it may just be a short section of some of those. If you look it up on the map, and it may just be a certain piece of the control section. It's not that whole route from one end to the other one. So just make sure you check into that before you do your IAs.
I'll see if some of that's listed with contracts and site manager, and we'll see if we can come up with a lookup.
We went through all this. Me and Luanna did back when we were talking about all this, and kind of had it narrowed down. I think she's got the information somewhere.
Okay.
Yeah, it's actually in the S701. These links are actually in there.
Okay.
But does it do it by contract lookup?
No.
Okay. Just any tools we can make to help. If it's something that sounds useful, we'll look at it.
Yeah. So, I mean, you basically have two forms plus your comparison forms. You got one IA sampling plan, and then you've got, this is for your information here. You don't even need that. And then you've got a report already done for each comparison test, and then you've got the certification, and that's it. So you're down to 3 forms. You don't have all those letters and all that mess. And every district is doing it different. every district had to develop their own little comparison sheets.
Luann, are you and I the only two left that even remembers when this was called record testing and not IA?
Probably Clay.
That means we've been here too long.
No, you got to count me in there.
Who's the other one that said that?
Steve Drawn in District 03.
Okay, so we got one other person left that remembers record test.
Yeah.
Record test used to be an actual separate entity of the lab. It wasn't even under the lab engineer years back.
Has Casey got all these online listed under our forms?
Yeah, it's all there.
Okay, I'll shoot out a link to everybody, along with I'll see if I can get this recording uploaded as well as get Luanna's PowerPoint, and we'll send that out to everybody for reference.
Well, one question: do you think the PEs would like the very quick version? It's probably like 6 slides. Do they care enough? Would they like to know? I guess I could offer it and see if anybody wants to hear about it.
They need to know to contact us when we do IAs, that they need to contact us to do this testing with them out in the field to make sure we know that when they're doing it, because that's the problem we've always had over the years, is not getting contacted, and they be done finished something and you find out too late.
Yeah, that happens to us a lot.
Okay.
I agree with that.
Well, then, if no other reason, I'll do it just to bring attention to that. You know, and this will be a good excuse. New IA program, PEs need to attend.
Good deal.
Okay, cool.
Luanna, you can include the area engineers on that?
Sure. Yeah. You want ADAs of engineering? They probably don't.
No.
They don't care.
No. They care. They just care about their own stuff they have to do.
The ADA of engineering, that position is over the lab. That would be the only ones that would care. Operations wouldn't care at all.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay.
Luanna,
Yes.
existing projects, would it be okay just to continue with the old schedule to finish off the project? Or do you recommend switching over to the new one?
Yes, existing projects are supposed to finish the old schedule, except, because I talked to Scott Nelson with FHWA. He said existing projects should finish with the existing schedule, except for asphalt. You can discontinue all asphalt project testing. Does that help?
Even if we have some asphalt tests already?
Well, you can turn those in, but see, we started the asphalt system approach
Okay.
2 to 3 years ago. We eased into it. You know, we had a few bumps in the road at the beginning, but at this point, we're double dipping on asphalt because we have all the labs accredited in asphalt, and we have all of our testers performing proficiency samples. So I think we have some redundancy there. I mean, if you just really want to do it, go ahead. I know it feels weird to let something go, but that's the reasoning behind it.
I think we have one project that we hadn't sampled asphalt yet for.
Yeah, I mean, just that you might want to emphasize when you're doing your proficiency samples, we really need to come up with good reasons when you're stating why you had a problem, you know, why you were outside of the Z-score. Need to dig into that and try to really find the answer to that. That is what is making this whole thing work. It's all about trying to do better quality in the field, trying to get better quality. So if you have something that doesn't match, if you have a bad Z-score, then really try to figure out what happened and write that in on your explanation.